Hey friends, Sean here, Mr. Hero Support, Hero Support Guy, your friendly neighborhood guide to the good life. Hope you're doing well today. I want to share an article with you from Blaze Media, written by Paul Sacca on September 10th, 2022. This article is a very sad story about a tragedy that occurred recently, in which somebody unalived somebody else. But the reason I want to share the article with you is because there's a couple of key um, aspects of this story that can be relatable to why I try to teach people to see themselves as someone with the power and the responsibility to intervene on their own behalf and on behalf of others to improve situations in their day-to-day life in little ways, right? You don't have to be a superhero level awesome, but you can just be an ordinary, everyday person living heroically, being a good person, trying to intervene when you can, and doing it in a way that creates a good situation and protects a good situation. So, in this story, a man and a woman in a relationship had a 1 year old child and another 7 year old child, but the parents were having some conflict in the relationship. There appears to have been a history of domestic violence happening from the person in the story that is described as the man against the person who's described as the victim, the female in this case. And got a little fly around me. But so, one of the key things that happened in this story is that the man and woman were having a social conflict, and the woman um, wanted to basically have the guy stop mistreating her, and he was kind of threatening her socially and not, you know, being willing to treat her with dignity and respect her boundaries. And so she decided to what appears to have what she did is kind of threaten to expose him for being covertly gay, and he didn't want apparently anyone to know that. And he also didn't like her talking to him in that way, and so he responded by hurting her body in an intense, very graphic way that I try not to, go into detail about. And so, is it her fault that he did something to her? No, obviously not. Especially since it's clear that they had a history of him mistreating her. Um, but the key points that I want you to come away with from this um, discussion is number one, something that the victim's dad says here. He says, if there's somebody out there abusing your daughter, don't take off. Don't let it go. Don't take no for an answer. If he said, you feel responsible no matter what anyone says. Every time I saw her, I would beg her, don't talk to him, the grieving father said. Leave him. And it seemed like the more I did that, the more she would see him. So, two things there. One is I'm always saying that if you're old enough to know what influence is, then it's time to be take responsibility for that, right? Personal ownership for the cause and effect sequence, action, consequence, right? When I do stuff, stuff happens. And it's important that you can admit that to yourself so you can know that you have the power to influence things. And then you can choose to do things that are constructive and catalytic that build up and move forward progress toward goals instead of doing things that are destructive and derailing, right? So that you can have self actualization, good rapport with others, get your human needs met for safety and respect and dignity, equality, peace, hope, love, sufficiency, stuff like that. Um, and then also advance progress toward goals, right? Without sacrificing that emotional and social well being. So obviously, the dad felt like he wasn't doing enough to, have an effect that he wanted to have to help make the situation better. And also earlier in the article, it describes that there was people in the neighborhood that were standing there and watching this bad thing happen. And so they were kind of functioning as bystanders, people standing idly by, right? So that's one thing that we kind of learn growing up a lot of times, is just to stand there and to not do anything to try to intervene. And obviously that can be very dangerous and risky. So it's important that you have a legitimate claim to the turf if you're going to intervene. And it sounds like these people did not have a legitimate claim to the turf of intervention. But the dad, he did have that legitimate claim to the turf in his relationship with his daughter, and he used it. And he said he tried to get her to leave the guy. That's another point, which is, if you ever seen any of the Harley Quinn character in the movies that she plays in, you know how she is so loyal to the Joker, and even in a way that is detrimental to her well-being. Right? She even harms herself in order to be accepted by him in one of the scenes. And so sometimes we talk about that as Stockholm Syndrome, where when somebody gets taken by someone else and then the cops come to rescue them, the victim identifies with the captor and doesn't want to leave. And so that is something that can happen. I think in psychology, they describe that as a trauma bond, when someone gets kind of addicted to the highs and lows of the conflict, and then the makeup and the conflict and the makeup. And, so like some days it's good and they're happy with you, and then other days they don't like you and they hurt you. And so you're getting pushed and pulled. And then you kind of get this chemical bond to the person. That's just my rudimentary understanding of that. I'm not a mental health clinician. I do have 14 years experience in the behavioral health field, so that's why I like to discuss stuff around behavior and what we can do to improve our behavior as managers of our day-to-day life. Um, so we hit that point about bystanders. We talked a little bit about the value of responsibility and for your actions, and also intervening when you can. And then the other big piece that I wanted to hit on was when I mentioned that the female partner, the victim in this story, responded to him in a way that was somewhat passive aggressively hostile, or socially threatening, in the sense that she said she was going to expose him, something that he didn't want her to. He didn't want people to know that he was, you know, either gay or abusive or what, who knows what. But according to the story, allegedly, but she was threatening him in the sense that, I'm going to expose you for this as a punishment. And so that's also not a good thing to do as a manager of day to day life. And it's precisely because of this example, right? So without blaming the victim, I'm definitely not doing that. Nobody deserves to get unalive for any reason. Um, but in this situation, when you're responding to someone who's done something that you don't like, it's important that you maintain dignity for yourself and them, even when you're attempting to resolve the conflict. So, for example, if he says something to her that she doesn't like, and she says, you can just say, I don't like that. I'm not okay with that, and I'm not going to go along with that. And so I'm going to choose to exit the relationship, or I'm going to choose to go take some space, or I'm going to have to reevaluate and come back to this discussion. It's always a good idea to not talk about stuff when you're emotionally, volatile, because then the emotions kind of cloud the information sharing. So we want to get rid of the emotions and just share the information, right? And when you're letting people know what's not okay with you and setting boundaries, you don't want to do it in a way that comes across as hostile or threatening, precisely because it damages your rapport with them, just like it did in this case, right? The way that she responded to this guy was obviously not taken well, and it came across as kind of hostile, you know, and threaten as a threatening gesture. I'm just assuming, if I try to have empathy and put myself in his shoes, right? And also in hers. So, um, we don't want to engage in domestic violence. We don't want to engage in oppression. One of the things we can do is try to intervene and tell people to stop when it's safe to do so, right? Like the dad was trying to do, trying to get his daughter out of there. He felt guilty for not confronting the guy enough, it looks like. And recognize when someone is in a trauma bond, right? And maybe try to get mental health counseling for them if they are ready to do that, and help to support them. And it's important to have a safety plan if you're going to stay in a relationship that is potentially dangerous, so that you can get out. And when you do, it's really important, if you're trying to get out of that situation, that you do it in a way that isn't going to inflame the situation even further, right? A lot of people, when they leave someone that's hurting them or mistreating them, they feel a sense of inner, like, fed up. I'm all fed up with this, and so I'm leaving. But then they might start talking crap to the person or putting them down, and that's not going to be productive to help you get out of there. Just get out of there, right? You don't have to have a fight and confront them in a rude way or anything like that. Just leave. And that's going to be the victory, is just getting out of that situation. That's just my opinion, and my take on that. And welcome what you guys think about it. Feel free to share your comments below, and have a great day and a great life.